On today's episode of Boundary Breakers, I have a fascinating discussion with Mr. Trevor Blake. Trevor was born in poverty in England and turned himself into a physicist and world-renowned entrepreneur. He and I discuss everything from his upbringing to quantum entanglement, observer theory, the energy of life, and his fascinating theory and understanding about how what we think about ends up becoming reality. If you have any interest, physics, science, and how it connects to life, interesting definitions of success and what all of that means, you're going to want to watch this episode. Enjoy. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. Can you give us just some initial background, sort of your origin story, where you came from, where you grew up, so that the audience gets a good idea of who they're talking with today?
Gladly. So, I often get asked, Trevor, who are you? And it's really hard one to answer from almost anybody, I think. Because the psychologists always say there's like three perspectives. There's how we see ourselves, and then there's how we think other people see us, and then there's how people actually see us. And there are three very different perspectives. So I can only give you how I see myself, but other people might say, that's bollocks. It's just, no, that's not who you are. But so I still see myself as a 5-year-old boy who's never grown up. And that's who I am. And that's how I feel. In life's attempts to help me grow up, I've been many things. I have grown up in poverty, in a kind of poverty that most people don't even know exists in the Western world. Father was unemployed and unemployable. Mother was dying of cancer, but never realized at the time that I was in poverty. So I had a blast. I had the most amazing lifestyle because they weren't able to contain me. They weren't able to educate me. They weren't able to give me rules. And so the door opened at 8 a.m, and as long as I was back at 5 p.m, there was food on the table. And I loved that lifestyle. And I think I still hanker after it, actually. So they taught me a huge amount by not trying to teach me anything. And inspired my life, and especially my mother, who, dying of cancer, just refused to die until her kids were grown up and safe. And I learned so much for everything I've achieved, what other people call success. All of that is down to lessons I learned watching my mother handle her cancer. So that's a huge part of my life. And I think that's formed the foundation of who I am. And so I grew up and found a way out of that by reading biographies. So I was getting bullied as a kid. And I was getting bullied because I was the wrong nationality in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nothing to do with me. I wasn't causing it. Just I was in the wrong place. And I used to fight a lot. I was gingerhead, carrot top, and I had a right temper on me. And I get into loads of fights, but I was a small kid. I wasn't a big kid. And so I would lose most of the fights. And in the end, I decided, no, this is crazy. I'll just hide when the bullies are looking for me. And these bullies were not people name calling or anything. These bullies had bats in their hand, and they wanted to kill me. And at one time, a guy with a shotgun came at me, and so I just said, you know what, I'm just going to hide. So I hid in the library, and just to kill time, I started reading books, and it was an alphabetical library, and so B was biographies, and A was autobiographies, and I just started reading, and it changed my life completely. Just reading about people through time who'd had this amazing. These terrible circumstances and had overcome their circumstances and been huge successes and made a difference in life. And it inspired me. And I thought, well, why am I being so full of self-pity when these people had an even worse start to life? So it gave me confidence to think, okay, if they can overcome that, I can overcome anything. And I did. So I followed their patterns of behavior and went out into the world and changed the way I thought, changed the way I imagined. And so I imagined a life that was better than the life I had at 14 years old. And then that life I imagined started to turn up. And I thought, oh, magic. This is really interesting. Like, I can imagine success and it shows up. Wow, what a secret. And I couldn't talk to anyone about it, but that's what I did. And then that took me out of poverty and into this incredible life of glamour as an officer in the Royal Navy and traveling the world and everything, and then a great corporate career. And then I've been an entrepreneur, started my own thing, and had, found a model that worked and repeated the model. So I've had what other people would look at and say, okay, that guy's, he's sold companies for $800 million. So that guy is successful. But I don't think of it that way. That's just money's energy, and it's just a thing. The secret that so the judgment for myself as of a successful life is that until my wife died in 2020, I was married for 38 years. That's a success. That's a huge success. I've never stopped having fun. I played soccer till I was 56 years old. That's a success. I still read like crazy. That's a success. I don't do social media or TV or any of that kind of stuff. So for me, you know, my sort of, whereas some people might, you know, give you a resume, for me, it's like I've perpetually been 5 years old, curious, playful, and continue that way. And I'm now in the third trimester of my life, and I still feel like 5 years old, and I can't wait to see what comes next. And I think if you're able to live a life that way, whereby tomorrow could possibly be better than today, isn't that enough? You know, it's just fantastic. So for me, that's who I am. It's like just a perpetual curious kid.
Wow. Well, just out of pure curiosity, where were you born?
I was born in Liverpool, and in a concrete jungle and hard scrabble life. And we were evicted 3 times before I was 7. And I didn't know what eviction was. I just thought, this is a great adventure. Oh, we're on the move again. This is great. We don't take furniture with us. This is great. And I think that's made me kind of nomadic for the rest of my life, because I'm on an adventure now. I'm on a travel journey for the next 30 years. No fixed abode, which is so exciting. And then, so when we were evicted the 3rd time, it was in the middle of the night. It was like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and my dad escaped the creditors. They were coming in the next day with baseball bats, basically, or our equivalent of baseball bats in England. And we escaped to the countryside, which in those days, it was possible to escape because there were no freeways. So you could just, you know, go through the maze of country lanes and end up somewhere and no one would ever find you. And we ended up in a ramshackle farmhouse. And I think for my parents, that would have been really stressful. But for a 7-year-old kid, it was like going through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and going through the back of the wardrobe, going into Narnia. It was just magical for me because I had no concept of responsibility or money or, you know, those things. So it was fantastic. So it changed my life completely. I know if I'd stayed in Liverpool, I'd be a completely different human being just because of the environment. But to be in the country like that, and I saw cows for the first time, and I thought they were just large dogs. You know,
oh, wow.
That's how little I knew about the world. And then so my parents just let me wander, and I wandered in the countryside for the next like 13, 14 years and just had an amazing thing. But what I got from that was I got to learn the energy of nature and the energy of life, because no one told me that that's crazy, right? So no one said that an animal just spoke to me. No one said, no, they didn't. It didn't happen. And no one said that, well, I can feel a storm coming. And no one said, no, you can't. It's ridiculous. So I got to engage very naively and openly with the world as it is. And that's formed my like next 40 years in the, you know, I'm all about energy and all about playing with energy in a different way and getting from life more of what we want and less of what we don't want, simply by learning to play with the energy of the world around us. And that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been a terrible start to life, as my parents would have judged it. Like, you know, we've got no money, we have to escape, we've got to take our 3 kids, how are we going to survive? I'm dying of cancer, you're an unemployable guy, how's it going to work out? But to a 7-year-old kid, it's like, this is great, you know?
Yeah. Well, God, I mean, what strikes me just off the bat is your positive outlook and your positive energy, just generally, which I can feel from here. But in explaining your sort of why and where you came from, you know, you just rattled off 3 or 4 or 5 negative experiences that might cause others to sort of live a life of depression and sadness. And from that, you seem to have gotten positivity and hope. Were you, I know you mentioned you didn't realize it as a kid, but when you're going through these experiences, your mother's dying of cancer, you guys don't have a lot of money. Was it sort of ignorance is bliss, or in other words, is it retrospectively you understand now that that's a positive experience, or have you just always been like that?
No, I think kids are much smarter than grown-ups give them credit for. I think we're really smart, really intelligent as kids. We observe the world somewhat openly, but for what it is. And then we get taught by our environment, no, don't think that way. We got to look at it this way. Stop imagining, start being logical, start being analytical, stop using your intuition. So, you know, the school and the religion and the culture and the environment make us different people. But when we're young, we're real human beings, I believe. And so what I teach through trevorgblake.com and the transformation experience is a journey back to remembering what we felt like when we were 5, where we can be curious about the world and we can see it in different ways. And so as a kid, it was very easy to observe the struggle of my parents. It was very easy to observe our environment. But at the same time, without the responsibility of having the pressure of having to say, oh, you need a car, or you need a mortgage, or you need this, you need a credit card, or you need a new pair of shoes, or like without that pressure as a kid, I couldn't understand why everybody else was stressed. But for me, it was like, well, I've got odd shoe, I've got a black shoe and a brown shoe, and a 6 size on here and a 5 size on here. Why would I care? I thought it was great. But as an adult, that would be a shame. And so I think we learn over time these filters that say you have to conform to a societal norm. And I think when we're young, when we don't have to do that and we can get away with it because we're too young for people to tell us off for thinking in a different way, I'm trying to get people to get back to that way of thinking, that if you can just be you, whoever you are, if you can find yourself again, you can live anywhere you want. I'll give you a good example. So we were just out for lunch. Actually, I just got back in time, like 10 minutes before this thing. So we're living in an environment, as you know, I don't know if you can see behind me, but it's, you know, it's well to do. It's very high end, and you know, it's what we would call a smart. It's got like 2 clubs and 5 restaurants and all this kind of stuff. And everyone's got their Bentley and the Rolls Royce, and they go to lunch and do all those kind of things. Well, Jess and I get on our high boy scooters and whiz through everybody. And we get pulled aside. The security pull us aside because they assume we're kids, and they assume that we're not supposed to be here because no one here rides a scooter, right? Like, so we keep getting pulled aside, and we have to show our ID, which is like a special ID to be allowed to live in here. And then everyone looks shocked at us, like, "What are you doing? You're supposed to behave like an adult. You're not supposed to do this. This is really confusing for us." We just got told off by a security guard.
Oh, wow.
For driving too fast on our scooter.
I love that.
At 19 miles an hour. And so I'm trying to get people to get back to the playfulness of their lives, because when we play, we can succeed. We can have anything we want. But the minute we stop playing, we end up conforming to society's judgment of ourselves, and that then the limits set in. Like, this is the ceiling. You can't go any higher. You can't be any better. The best you can hope for is a slightly bigger house or a slightly newer car or something. What I'm saying is, when we get back to our playfulness, the world's our oyster, just like it was when we were 5. Remember, you're 5 and someone said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And you go, "I'm going to be a ninja."
Yeah.
And remember that excitement? And I can't say that without doing that.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to get back into people's lives is get back to that.
Yeah.
The joy of, it's never too late. You're never too old. It's never the wrong time to reinvent yourself and be the best version of yourself. And there's ways to do it. I'm a physicist, so I have tools and techniques that in the transformation experience that help people use a tool and technique today that will benefit them tomorrow, that allows them to get back to that memory of the excitement of being 5 again. Yeah. Excitement of being a kid. Oh.
Well, I have 5 children. The oldest is 11. So, and the youngest is about to turn 3. So I know exactly what you mean when you say, you know, that feeling of what do you want to be when you grow up? And I want to make sure that we really dive into the transformation experience and what you're doing and how you're guiding people on your website. I want to connect us there first, though. You went from being in the countryside, in poverty, to a physicist. How did you get there? How'd you go from poverty in the countryside to a physicist?
Because I had a bad temper. I was a redhead. So I was in a physics class and I wasn't doing well. And I didn't understand it, but it wasn't my fault. That the responsibility for learning is with the teacher, not the student. And I don't think schooling understands that. And so I was in a physics class, and the physics teacher, his idea of teaching was to turn his back on the class and scratch on the chalk, on the blackboard. And we had to copy it down. And it's so boring for a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid to do that. Where's the excitement? Where's learning stuff? And so I kind of chilled. I kind of vacated physics in my head and in the school. And then it came to doing exams. And we had, in those days, we had a thing called mock exams. So you pretend it's the big exam and you try to do well and they give you a score and then they coach you and then you do the real exam. And in the mock exam, I got 33%, which is an F. And the teacher came up and he said, if I were you, I wouldn't even bother turning up. And I was so mad at being dismissed like that because it was his fault. He was a rubbish teacher. And it was his fault. And I couldn't say anything because his son was in my class. And so it was embarrassing for his son. We all hated this teacher. And hate's not too strong a word for the time because we wanted to learn. We really wanted to learn something cool. And all he could do was take a book, write it on the chalkboard because there aren't enough books for everybody. And that's how teaching was to him. And so I got so mad, I took myself back to the library and I went to the P section and I read everything I could read on physics without knowing what I was doing. And what I found out later, what I'd done was I read all the university texts.
Oh, wow.
And not knowing that. And it was fascinating because it was about quantum physics and I had never heard of this before. And it was talking about quantum entanglement and string theory and observer effect. And I think, wow, this is mind-blowing stuff. Why am I not being taught this? And why did my parents not talk about this? Because, of course, they didn't know about it. They grew up in the Second World War. Their education was cut off by a war. And so I was blown away by it. And then when I went back and took the exam, I realized that I'd been learning university physics and all the things I've been struggling with were like child's play because I've been reading this higher level learning. And so I got an A in my physics exam. And then afterwards, the teacher came up to me and said, I don't know how you did it. I know you cheated. I know you cheated. And I couldn't believe it. So after that, I was kind of, to prove him wrong, I went on this kind of trajectory to always be in physics. Because the thing about physics is to learn how and why things work. So I like the facts. There's so much, there's a thing out there right now called the fire hose of falsehood. It's part of life. There's all these self-help gurus and these personal development gurus who claim they know what they're talking about, but they're just making it all up. I like facts. I like to say, okay, if you use this tool, it works because of, it's a science thing. And so I went on that trajectory. So when I joined the Royal Navy, I was already very good at physics. And then they taught me radiation physics. And then I ended up working in the English healthcare system as a radiation physicist. So I kind of went physics on physics on physics and kind of compounded my knowledge a little bit. And that's how it all came about. It came from anger, motivation to prove that teacher wrong, who probably still, if he's still alive, probably thinks I cheated.
Wow. Well, Guy, I just want to say, look, I mean, to the extent that a teacher has a responsibility to try to inspire and instill hope and optimism in learning, that I can't think of anything worse to say to a student than you might as well not even show up. To me, that's like the antithesis of what a teacher should be. But so I've got to ask you this. I know enough about this to sound like a fool. And I don't want to hijack the whole discussion on this, but I've got to ask you about some of this quantum entanglement and the observer theory stuff. Can you? This is a very complex topic. Can you explain to the audience, I guess in the most general, simple way possible, quantum entanglement?
Yeah. So it sounds complicated just by the words, but it's not. It's really simple. It's how life works. And I do think when people have a little bit of knowledge, they add a jargon to make it seem special and take the jargon out and it's really pretty obvious. So I think I can explain it and everyone else will go, oh yeah, I get that. That happens all the time for me. So there are certain principles. So the thing about quantum physics, so quantum is a Latin word. It just means how much. That's all it means, how much. And physics, the definition is the study of the relationship between energy and matter. So basically quantum physics, which most people, when they hear that word, will hide behind the sofa. It actually just means how much are material and energy related. That's it. That's it. It's just a study of that. And of course, they're related perfectly. But then we can play with that. So that's the thing about the transformation experience. You can learn, if you know that, then you can say, I'll do this differently now. And then you can have better outcomes. So you can take a modicum of control over your life experiences. So there's this beautiful principle. So things work at the micro level differently than they work at our level, the macro level. But there are certain principles that work perfectly in both worlds. And quantum entanglement is one of them. So one of the beautiful things is that the whole of the world is made of the same stuff. Everything is energy. If you look inside the energy, you'll see that there's two things, two building blocks, like Lego blocks. And one's called fermions and one's called bosons. Sounds incredibly complicated, but they're just named after the people who invented them. Professor Fermi, Professor Bose. We have to label stuff, and that's what people typically do, is say, I don't know what to call this. Well, who invented it? Oh, Professor, we call it a fermion. And so we have these things called fermion and bosons, and that's the building blocks of everything. So everything in the universe is made of these things. So I am made of fermions and bosons. The view behind me is made of fermions and bosons. The computer is made of fermions and bosons. Interesting implications of that. Fermions and bosons are energy. The laws of energy, which are undeniable, are that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, just converted to other forms, like an ice cube to vapor, and vapor to condensation, back to rain, back to ice. The world is like that. Our whole world exists that way. That means that because energy can't be destroyed, nothing ever dies. Nothing and no one can ever die. So I was brought up to think of a tree as alive and a coffee table is dead. It turns out that the coffee table is just as alive as this tree, but it's vibrating in a different way, which makes it look like a coffee table now to me, and a tree looks like a tree. So, important principle, everything's made of fermions and bosons. These particles are connected forever. So, if I took the two particles and sent one to the moon and kept one here, they can communicate instantaneously. There's no delay. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no wire. They communicate instantaneously. So knowing that I'm fermions and bosons, I can, if I choose, instantaneously connect with you, Brandon, in your fermions and bosons forever. And so this wonderful podcast will be over. And in 2 years, I might say, I wonder how Brandon's doing. And in that moment, you'll think, I wonder how Trevor's doing. Haven't heard from him for ages. And then the phone will go and there'll be a text from one of us to the other. And that's the beauty of quantum entanglement. So I have tools and techniques in the transformation experience that allows us to play with this in beautiful ways. So we'll pick somebody we haven't heard from ages, typically someone we don't like, and we'll send them a hug, kind of a quantum entanglement hug. And in every single occasion, I get emails from people saying, they just called, they just texted. They just connected. And so we learned that we're all connected this way. And therefore, if we know that quantum entanglement is a real thing, we can use it for our benefit. We can connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime we need it. So if I'm facing one of my entrepreneurial issues, I've got a roadblock or a road bump, and I'm trying to figure out how to overcome it, I can find someone who overcame the same thing through a biography, for instance, and I can quantum entangle through time with that person. And I'll get the solution. And that's how I've built all these companies. I mean, I've built 7 companies. So I don't have any skills. I have no.
I doubt that. I don't think that's the truth.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. I have no training, so I have no talent. My late wife and my current wife won't let me near a toolbox. I have no talent, and so. But I know quantum entanglement, and I know that I can find a solution to anything just by projecting my fermions and bosons to someone or something that already figured it out and bringing it back to me.
Well, so what's crazy to me, or what's difficult for me to wrap my mind around, is the idea that, like you mentioned, you could take one entangled particle. Is it particle? Is that the right word? One entangled particle. If it's entangled with another one without any limitation to space, there's instantaneous communication, right? So that means That has to mean that the speed of light isn't a limiting factor in terms of how fast information can travel, right?
It's instantaneous.
And
it's what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. He couldn't understand it and he couldn't figure it out. Technology today is starting to figure it out in an amazing way. So we already know. So we have these companies in New York that have instantaneously transferred packages of data to Europe instantaneously. So even as they plug it in, it comes up the other end. And so, the implications for security, Wi-Fi security and all the rest of it are fantastic, and whole industries are going to be born out of this, and brilliant companies. I hope I can pick the one this time that's going to be the big star. I haven't been very good at that in the past, but so we're already doing this, but it leads to other crazy imagination things about is teleportation possible?
Right.
Yeah.
But so these companies in New York, they're utilizing physics, they're utilizing the quantum entanglement principle in order to communicate information instantaneously
and securely, because no one can get to it in time. And you can just search. Anyone can do a browser search, and the latest articles on this are just mind blowing. It is mind blowing, and I love it. But we're just kind of at the forefront of it. It's like it's like the Wild West right now as far as quantum entanglement is concerned.
It is. That's unbelievable. And so that's a great summary of it. So the observer paradox, or the observer theory, or whatever it's called, I want to hit on that too, because this one is just outside of the realm of human comprehension, I think.
I mean, yes and no, and yet we all know that what we pay attention to grows. So if we focus on something that really hurts us, it hurts us more and grows and gnaws away at us. And we think of somebody who's said something about us in the past, and the more we think about it, the worse it gets, and the harder it gets to deal with. And the same thing is if we were to focus on something that's good for us, we would get more of that. So it's fairly straightforward in that what we observe, we get. If anybody, so the way I think about this is, why do we need to know how it works? We all know how a TV works. We switch it on, go like that. But no one studies plasma science. It's a plasma TV or an LED TV, but no one knows what that means. So you don't have to understand the complicated formulae that are behind any of this. You just have to say, okay, I'll use it.
Right.
I'll change the channel. I'll put the volume up. I'll make it powerful. And so that's what I try to teach is that, if you want to get into the depth of why it works, and I'm here for you, but you really don't. You just need to use this technique. So with the observer effect, the plasma science behind the observer effect, for a good comparison, is that in any moment, all possibilities exist. And sometimes without even knowing why or how, we pick an outcome and it shows up. So how does that play out like a TV, like the volume channel in our real lives? So if we get an email alert that says your credit card payment is due, and we look at that and our stomach turns over and we go, oh my God, how do I get into such a mess and how do I get out? The effect of that is what we just paid attention to is going to come back to us. So we're going to get more debt, more reasons for debt. The roof's going to leak. We're going to lose something. The kids want a new pair of sneakers or something. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And so what we have to do is observe the fact that what we're observing, we get more of. And people like Wayne Dyer, is I'm not into self-help, but he was a self-help guru. He used to say things. He used to have these wonderful quotes at times that would say, you can never get enough of what you don't want. And what he was trying to say was, the more we focus on what we don't have, the more we end up not having. And so, because we're observing the lack, we're observing the debt, we're observing the problem. And so what we do is we switch it around and we start to imagine what it would feel like to be debt-free. And when we focus and observe what it feels like to be debt-free, we start to change the circumstances around us and we become debt-free. And it's easy to say, but the proof is really important. So in the transformation experience, one of the first things I get from everyone who joins is an email, and it's always in capitals. And it always says, wow, I am debt-free for the first time for as long as I can remember. And it's the most amazing email that I get, because from that point, everything's possible. when we're all wrapped up in debt, it's going to be hard to achieve stuff. So we have to get out of debt first, and then we build financial independence. And that's the key thing. So first of all, we observe. So I help people observe what it would feel like to be debt free. Then they become debt free. All kinds of strange miracles that, as people describe them, you won't believe what just happened today. Well, I do, because it happens all the time. And so finally, when they get free from that, and it really is a freeing thing. I've been in so much debt in my life that I know how heavy that feels. I remember walking to a bank to try and draw £20 out in England, and I only had £10 in the account. I remember how embarrassing that was. And so I know what it feels like. And so when you get away from that and you get debt free, you lift up, the weight comes off your shoulders. And from that point forward, you only observe what it's like to be debt free. And so that's when the miracles start to come in, and we have all these incredible experiences. So we always get what we observe, what we pay attention to grows, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And sometimes it feels like life has an opinion and it's cruel, but it's not. It has no emotion. So what we think about, we get. So if we think about debt, we get debt. If we think about relationship problems, we get more relationship problems. If people are, dating online because they're lonely, they're thinking about being lonely, and it's not going to work. So we have to change our mindset to start to focus. It's not positive thinking, because that's impossible. It can't possibly happen, because our thoughts take 500 milliseconds to form. It's about catching ourselves in the moment of thinking and focusing on the things that we don't want in our lives, and saying, hang on, just for this moment, I'm going to think about what I do want. And then we imagine something amazing, like, flying in a private jet or whatever turns anybody on. And the moment we make that switch, we change the circumstances around us, and amazing things happen. And it's easy for me to talk about, but I talk about it because I learned to do this. And I learned to do this not by any genius on my part, but by simply reading biographies. And this is what people did, like Madam C.J. Walker or Henry Ford. This is what they did when they found themselves in terrible circumstances and decided not to focus on the circumstance, but to focus on how they really want to be and who they want to be. And I just decided to do the same thing. And my life changed dramatically, and it's been an amazing adventure ever since, and it's still continuing. So in a physics sense, if you get into the minutiae of it, it could be very complicated. It's a complicated formula, but no one needs to know the plasma science. You just need to know how to use the remote control. And so the remote control is just focus on what you want. And every time you feel panicky, anxiety, every time you feel knocked back, it's okay. Don't blame yourself. Just say, it's fine. It's life. It's okay. And then you just say, I'm going to think about success. I'm going to focus. I'm going to daydream. I'm going to be Walter Mitty for a few seconds. And that makes all the difference.
That's a really fascinating outlook, because the little that I know about the whole observer thing, I was looking at it from sort of the inverse perspective, right? Where your perspective is that what we think about grows, and that the power, if you will, is in the observer. My misunderstanding was that the phenomenon was that it was in what was observed, what was being observed, knew whether it was being observed, and would change based on whether it was observed or whether it was not. But that's a really, really, really interesting, different way to think about it.
I honestly think they're the same, Brandon. So when we focus on what we want, that is being observed knows it's being observed, and it steps forward, and it takes the forward position, and that's all it is. Out of an infinite number of possibilities, or infinite possibilities, what we think about becomes our reality, and it's a video game we're stuck in. And that's okay. I don't mind being in a video game, but I don't want to be the character that gets killed in the first round.
Yeah,
I want to stay to the end. I want to get to the top of the video game. So I don't mind if it's all a hologram or a video game or a pawn in some god's chess game or something. I don't care, so long as I am happy and stay around. So if I focus on what I want, somehow, and I don't know how, but somehow life will configure a way to make that happen. And my life has been an example of that. I mean, we talked earlier on, growing up in a ramshackle farmhouse to being a guy who builds 7, 9-figure companies, exits, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And yet it's because I just focused on it.
But and what you're saying has been proven at a molecular level, right? That I guess it's particles or whatever that they're observing via microscope behave differently when they're being observed versus when they're not being observed. And they've tried all types of tricks to try to trick the thing into not knowing it was being observed, but regardless, it knows when it's being observed and when it's not being observed.
And it anticipates the fact that you're going to observe, which is mind blowing. Is like it's ahead of us. It's like, oh, he's going to think about us now. Before we think about it. I mean, I can't. So I also can't get my head around it. I was a kid that used to look at the night sky, and I used to think, well, what's at the end of the universe? And you go mad thinking about that. And people say, well, it's infinite. And I'd say, but is it in a box? What's outside the box? You know? And so you drive yourself insane. And the truth is, you don't need to figure it out. You just need to play with it. And then you're going to have a bit of fun and more adventures. Just life's going to be a little bit more pleasant than it has been for most people. That's it. You don't need to know or figure it out. Let's just play the game.
Yeah. God, that's fascinating. Well, so talk to us about this transformation experience at trevorgblake.com. So could you just sort of introduce us to it and walk us through what that experience is like?
Yeah, it's a life-changing experience. And I do warn people to be prepared for change because you can't unlearn, right? You can't unlearn what's in here. So this might freak a few people out who are watching or listening, but I'll tell it as it is. So I wanted to write a book for a long time, but one of my issues with self-help and personal development is that most of the books, and I like the books, and they're very positive and they make you feel good about your life, but they don't give you tools to change your life. And most of the books are written by people who hadn't achieved anything before they wrote the book, and they got on Oprah and all the rest of it. And then those people become successful. And that's fine. I just felt that there was something lacking. And so I held off until I could show that using these tools and techniques, you can go from nothing to something. So I started my first company with $200, sold it 6 years later for $105.5 million, having set an intention. I'm very much into intentions, not goals. Like, goals are great, but they don't get you your dream. So I have a technique for getting the dream, which is proven because I've done it many times. And so, so my intention at the time was, I have sold my first company for at least $100 million, not knowing even what I was doing. I had an idea, but no idea how to execute. And then, 6 years later, it sold for $105.5. So I thought, okay, now I can write this book. And the reason I wrote the book, I wanted to write it, but I said to my wife stupidly that I'm going to take some time out. I've been working since I was 17. And she rolled her eyes and she said, that's not going to happen. But I said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take some time out and take a year off. And after 2 weeks of pacing the kitchen floor, she actually picked up a knife and she said, if you don't write that book now, I'm going to kill you. And so I started the book. And that's how 3 Simple Steps came out. 3 Simple Steps. I decided to use the same tools and techniques as I've lived by. I said, okay, here's the book. It has a life of its own. Send it out there. No clever promotions, no nothing. Just let's see what happens to it. And it became a New York Times bestseller 3 times. And my claim to fame is that one time it knocked 50 Shades of Grey off the #1 spot for about 2 hours.
Oh, wow. That's
so
cool.
I replaced BDSM for 2 hours, and I'm so happy about that. I want that on my gravestone.
I love it.
Or S&M, whatever. But it was a great success. And so a lot of people were drawn to it and said, this has changed, and it changes lives. And sometimes that's all you need is a $9.99 book to change your life. And all my proceeds went to charity, which I think added some authenticity to it. Plus, it was tools and techniques that I use on a regular basis because I'm as flawed as anybody and I need them on a daily basis. So I think that drew people to it. And then other people said, well, I want more information. Where does this come from? I need to know how and why. Because I'd avoided using the word quantum physics in that book, 3 Simple Steps, because I thought it would put people off. Probably a mistake on my part, but anyway. So if people were asking for something like a book club or something, and then so I was walking in the woods one time, and I'm very much into a balanced life. So 2 hours working, 2 hours walking in the woods. And so where the magic happens, you get that aha moment of, why didn't I think of that before? And so, because you switch it off. And so I'm walking in the woods, and it arrived like a blueprint on my head or in my head. And basically it was done. I knew the whole thing. And so I went back home and spent the next 2 or 3 months just making it look pretty online. But it was the same information that was dumped on my head. I didn't edit, I didn't add, I didn't change, I didn't do a thing to it. I don't know where that came from, except from the universe. And that became the transformation experience. And it started out as physics of success. And then over time, people were put off by the word physics. So I changed it and said it's a transformation experience. I regret doing that, to be honest, because there are so many transformation experiences out there. And it's kind of an overused word. But it is what it says. You get what's on the label. It's a life transformation experience. And it's not complicated. It's a lot of fun. It was very sciencey when I put it together because I'm a scientist guy. And then I met, after my wife died 2 years later, I met Jess, who was is a world-renowned illustrator animator. And she added illustrations to it to cement points. And I've had so many people say, I didn't understand what you're talking about, but I get the picture. And I think that, so we got that nice little balance there. It is life-changing. There's no going back. That's all I can say. And since 2012, I think I've only had 1 or 2 people ask for the money back, but they didn't do the work. So I'm not surprised they didn't get success. You've got to do the work. You've got to use the tools and techniques, so not once, but make them part of your life. If you're serious about wanting the life you want rather than the life you're having. And it's that simple. And it's a very honest, authentic experience. Done correctly, it takes 30 to 45 days the first time. Most people do it again and again and again and again. I'll give you real examples. 13-year-old girl in Sri Lanka. How she got a copy of 3 Simple Steps, I have no idea. I hope it wasn't from a dumpster, but she found a copy of 3 Simple Steps, and she was working in a sweatshop, but all she wanted to do was dance. And it gave her the courage to say, I'm not doing this anymore, to her parents, and I'm going to dance. And of course, you can imagine the horror of that discussion. She's now, actually, she just qualified. I've kept in touch with her. She's now graduated from the Royal Ballet in London. And that's all down to the tools and techniques. One of my favorite recent stories is a guy who was in the corporate world, did very well, right up there, big corporation vice president, but miserable as hell, terrible relationships, which is a typical story because of the stress, and didn't have the courage to make the jump into his own thing, but he had a great idea. And I kind of held his hand while he jumped through the transformation experience. And we've kept in touch. He always wanted to live in Norway, where his ancestors are from. Now he's working in Norway. He didn't choose it. It happened. Life came in and said, here's an opportunity, go this way. Ends up in Norway. He's doing $250 million deals right now.
Wow.
Living the life of dreams, great relationship. He's let go of all his terrible relationships. And that's a reality. I'm not claiming any credit for it. It's just the tools and techniques. It's that if we have the discipline to learn why these things work and then practice on a regular basis with the tools and techniques, it has no choice but to work. It's science. So it's not like you're following a Tony Robbins who says, walk on hot coals and everything will be fine. This is real stuff. This is real tools and techniques that will change anyone's life if you want it to. The change is not for everybody.
So how many folks, just roughly, how many folks have gone through the experience?
Oh, since 2012, probably 30,000. I don't keep tracks, but so I'd say 30,000. In the beginning, I gave it away for free to everybody, and I worked through a magazine at the time that was called Ode, ODE, and then became the the Intelligent Optimist or something like that. So I would do these courses for that. The chief editor, CEO, Jurien Kamp, a Netherlands guy, very, cool guy, great journalist. I did it for him for free to loads of people, and a lot of those people are now paying to still be part of it, which is fantastic.
Oh wow!
Yeah, no, it's great. It's genuine, it's authentic, and I would, if someone did it and life didn't change, I would know why. It would be because they haven't been doing the tools and techniques, but I would still give them the money back anyway. I don't need the money, but the money pays for the infrastructure. It's a multimedia experience, so it's quite expensive back end. It's really complicated, very complicated back end in order to be able to deliver to people seeing key messages, hearing key messages, reading key messages, and then special clips that I've curated from people and I have their permission to use. Famous people who will say, okay, like who can I give as a good example? Yeah, they'll come back to me, but anyway, so people who have sort of come out of the closet, who have said the reason, like Ray Dalio's one. Okay, so he comes out of the closet and he says, "I owe everything to meditation." That's a brave thing for a billionaire to say, and not be afraid of the backlash and the, making a fool of yourself. So people like him, I have permission of to say, okay, I record this with these people and put that in there too, and say, look, don't take my word for it. Here's someone really successful who you all know, and he's done the same thing, and it worked. And so it's all like that. And a lot of movie stars, etc. Who claim that they had no talent, but did these things, and it just showed up. And that's the thing.
Wow. So would you recommend that folks start with the 3 simple steps, or jump right into the experience?
No, so the first thing I say on transformation is make sure you read 3 simple steps first, because it's like $9 or $10 or something. I think my royalty is 90 cents. Thank you, because it gives you a grounding, and it changes the way we think. It's also a great story. It's a beautiful story about my mother and how that how I learned the power of indefatigable through watching my mum dealing with cancer and being told she only had 6 months to live, and saying, "You got that wrong. I'll decide when I die." That gave me so much strength as a kid. So those stories are really important. So you can say, okay, I see how it works in real life, and you get the basics and you practice a little bit. And after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, you think, this is working. Amazing things are happening in my life just because I'm changing the way I'm thinking. Now I want to go deeper. And so I would start with the book, because the worst thing is you're out $10, and that's not even a glass of wine in a nice restaurant. So
right. No, that makes sense. And so is the experience, does it revolve around mindset, intuition, and self-awareness, or go ahead?
So no, it's a lot more. So the law of energy is, like we mentioned before, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only converted into the form. The definition of magic is that magic is the conversion of one form of energy into another form of energy within the laws of nature under the power of will. So whereas 3 Simple Steps, the book, is about how to play with energy, the transformation experience is about how to become a magician. And if that's what you desire, then you read the book and then you go into transformation experience. And your life as you know it, the minute you start, is over, which has consequences, because it often means that in order to achieve our dreams, I'm going to have to leave some people behind, perhaps, or change your location, maybe change your vocation. You have to be prepared for change, and it comes fast.
Interesting. So how does it handle the people that don't know? They don't necessarily have a sort of a concrete, future state or dream.
I think most people don't know, Brandon, to be honest with you. If I ask the question, if you have no impediments, what do you want? Most people can't answer that question. And so that's part of the transformation experience. So it's not at the beginning, it's at the end. So you learn the tools and techniques, you practice with them, you unravel the person you think you've become to go back to the person you were born to be. That's the starting point. And then you learn to take these new neural pathways that were just created through that process, which haven't been polluted by headline news or politics or priests or teachers or parents. And you say, okay, where are we going to plug this in? And so the middle part of the course is I plug this in here. And so we get into nature, we get into different types of meditation. We get to experience the power of communicating with the world around us. The previous was always there, but we never saw, never knew existed. And then when we have that new power, then we decide to direct it somewhere. It's about targeting. So when you look at all the surveys about what makes success, it always comes down to the same 2 things. It's self-confidence and a tendency to set big targets. And so we build the self-confidence, then we say, okay, now where we're going to target. And the first question we ask is, all right, what do you want? And it's a hard question, and no one can answer instantly. I've never met anyone who can say straight away what they really want. And so we go through a process of unraveling what do you think you're supposed to say that will make everyone happy, and what you really want to say that will make you happy. And so we go through that whole process till you get to the point where you say, okay, now I know what I want. And the answer is always surprising to everybody. The answer will shock everybody when we do this exercise the right way. Other people will say, well, I'm a junior manager. I want to be a vice president. But when we go through this whole process, they say, actually, I want to be a painter. So it's finding out who you really are. And then from that, setting an intention from the future, because time's an illusion. So we talk about how time's an illusion and how to understand all that. So setting an intention in the future of your future self, of how you feel living the life of your future self, and then we pull it into the present. It sounds very mystical and very woo-woo, but it's actually very scientific. And then when everyone gets a handle on that, they already feel what it's like to be that person. And that's when it speeds up. And that's when the life that you really want to live comes to you. And that's a magical process. I get so excited by the emails I get from people who've just experienced it. It's just, I just got one earlier, and it's fantastic. It makes me, I think my ego kicks in, and it makes me feel really good that I did something good for once in my life, you know?
Yeah. You mean for like the 1,000th time in your life, that you've had an unbelievable career and have enjoyed a lot of success. And my definition of success is not material necessarily or wealth, but I think that success is the extent to which we're able to impact others.
I completely 1,000%, if there is such a thing, agree with that.
Well, gosh, that makes me feel good, because maybe, who knows, if there's two of us, maybe I'm not completely wrong. But
no, my mission, vision, values for all my companies have always been the same statement. I don't do mission, vision, values, but it's the same thing. And I say it at the end of every podcast or every Trev's Keys. I have a membership, and I do a exclusive weekly podcast for everybody on any topic. But I always leave it the same way: is make a positive difference in someone's life, have fun doing it, and share in all the rewards, material or otherwise, that come naturally as a result of setting that energy in motion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, powerful.
What was the last part? So enjoy the benefits, material or otherwise?
Positive difference in someone's life. Have fun doing that, and share in all the rewards, material and otherwise, that come naturally as a result of setting that energy in motion. So if we do things the right way, my mom always said, Trevor, no matter what, do the right thing. Even if it's hard, it'll never go badly. And she was totally right. So when we do the right thing, amazing things show up. So we feel good. We get the material reward as a side effect. Like the money's a side effect, right, of success. I mean, I've never thought about money, but we do something good and it shows up. But also the spiritual side of it. We do something good and we grow as a human being. You can't lose. So make a positive difference in someone's life. Have fun doing it, because otherwise, what's the point? And sharing all the rewards, material and otherwise, that come naturally as a result of setting that energy in motion.
Gosh, I love that. And that connects it to what you've said all along, that this is science, this is physics, right? This is the energy and the transfer thereof, not some type of mystical.
No, you don't have to believe anything I'm saying. Just do it. And
right.
It, Yeah.
Right.
You don't need to believe anything. That's one of the reasons I got into the personal development in the first place, is that the pressure that's put on people to believe in a program or believe in a guru or it's so stressful. And I've done that. I wanted to believe in Wayne Dyer until I found out what his real life was like. I wanted to believe in some of these gurus until I saw what they behaved like in public. I've met most of them. So this way, you don't have to believe. You've got scientific tools and techniques. You just do it and enjoy it and enjoy the results.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. Well, so you mentioned earlier when we first started talking that you're in the third trimester of life. I'm curious if you were able to travel back in time to your first trimester or even earlier than that, based on everything that you've done and all the things all of the dots that you've connected and things that you've figured out, what would you tell your earlier self?
Trust yourself.
Trust yourself.
I would say tell Trevor to trust himself. He was right, and he let people talk him out of it. And I think that's true for most people. We know who we are when we're young. And inadvertently, not by any design. No one's being malicious. It's just people are being kind and saying, don't get ahead of your station in life. Don't, get a job that earns money. Don't follow your artist dream or something like that. But I think I would go back to everybody, not just me, and say, when you're young, trust yourself, because that's who you are. And there's a purpose, there's a reason why you're like that. And so just follow that dream, regardless of what your teacher says, regardless of how annoyed your parents get with you, regardless why your friends make fun of you or bully you or anything like that. Trust yourself. No one knows. No one knows but you who you are. That's
so cool. That's really cool. I feel like there's 1,000 questions that I want to ask you, each of which is like an hour-long discussion, and it's because you have so much just interesting insight in your mind. If you were given 15 minutes on the world's largest platform, on Joe Rogan, who one of these big podcasts, and we're just said, look, you can talk about anything that you want to talk about, or convey any message you want to convey, what would you want to talk about?
There's so many topics, and so my late wife has said, be careful asking Trevor an opinion, because he's bound to have one. So I have an opinion on most things. I actually would choose topics that people feel uncomfortable with. So Jess and I teach sex magic, and in America, you mention that word sex, and people hide behind the sofa or something. But it's not what people think. So it's about using different types of energy to also speed up achievement, speed up success. So I would talk about things that people feel very uncomfortable about, because I think it's fun to do that.
Yeah. And
also to kind of take away the stigma and the layers that society puts around these things.
Right.
Yeah. So I talk about sex probably.
The second that I think that was not on the 1,000 list of questions that I had to ask, but gosh, you're a guru in other areas as well that I didn't even know about. Well, so what does the third trimester hold for you? A lot of travel and a lot of fun. You don't know, you don't have it planned out, or?
Truth is, I don't have a plan, and I do know, and this is probably going to freak all your listeners out right now, but as my wife, as Lynn was dying, and she was in ICU. It was during COVID. She didn't die of COVID. She died of a reaction to a contrast media in an MRI that she had. And I know. But she'd been very ill for a very long time, and she was exhausted, and she knew it was her time to go. And they did their best in the ICU to keep her going. And after 6 weeks, they said that, or after 5 weeks, they said, no, we can't do anything. And I walked in one day, and Lynn turned to me and she said, Trev, I think it's my time. And it was like the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. Even when I think about it now, I want to cry. And I didn't want to hear it. But then for the next week, as they pulled off one medicine after another, she kind of went in and out of consciousness. And it seemed to me like she was going somewhere, because she totally when the staff were in the room, she was unconscious. When the staff left the room, she'd open her eyes and start talking to me. And she would download information to me. And she'd say, Trevor, if you want, for the next 30 years, this is what you're going to live to 93 if you choose. And this is what you're going to do. If you choose it. And I didn't want to hear, I like that. I didn't want to hear a word. And I was broken. I was completely broken as a human being throughout the whole thing. And then the last couple of days, she said, I want to die at home. And that was, again, COVID, they wouldn't let you do that, but we managed to, we're very subversive, Lynn and I, so we managed to get away. We basically had, it was like Ocean's 13 or something. We managed to get out of the ICU. I'm not kidding. It was so complicated. Wow. Get into an ambulance that's not supposed to be where it's supposed to be. People who aren't supposed to be doing this. And we got her home, and I set the home up perfectly. And then, she died at home. But she gave me these instructions. And during the last 4 or 5 hours, hospice was supposed to turn up, but the hospital has screwed up the company, and the hospice didn't turn up. So I was left alone with Lynn, and she died in my arms that night. And before she died, she gave me this really important message, and I never forgot it, but I didn't do anything about it. 3 months after she had died, I was on a podcast with a guy who I didn't want to talk to because I was grieving, and he didn't want to talk to me because he didn't want to talk to an entrepreneur because he's a spiritual guy. I had no idea why we were talking to each other, except that we had the same publisher, and I found out later they'd set up this connection. And we had this amazing hour, all through which Lynn talked to him, not me, And he kept doing this, and I kept thinking, well, what's that about? And I thought the producer was giving him the questions. And then after it finished, he said, oh, that was exhausting. She wouldn't leave me alone. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Lynn. And her name's Linda, but I called her Lynn, so we're using the name that connects us. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, so she said the whole time the same thing we just talked about, tell Trevor to trust himself, and she won't leave me alone. I'd be happy to be a conduit for the two of you. And I said, no, because I'm a cynic about this stuff, right? No, forget it. And then 2 weeks later, our paths crossed again in a completely different way through a music video. And he hadn't been a medium for 14 years. He'd given it up like ages ago. And this hadn't happened to him for 14 years. And he said, look, she won't leave me alone. You've got to listen to her. So we agreed to a Zoom, and no money exchange or anything like that. And I said, is it okay if I record it as a press record? It was 1 hour and 20 minutes. And in that 1 hour and 20 minutes, I got a one-way conversation from Lynn from another space, telling me exactly what the next 30 years will be like for me if I choose to take it. And I didn't know if I even wanted to live anymore, to be honest with you. I contemplated all kinds of options. And in the end, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this on. And Lynn said to me, in 18 months to 2 years' time, you're going to meet this amazing soul who's a different psyche to you, and you are going to get married, and you are going to have a new relationship. And I couldn't imagine holding anyone else's hand, let alone having a relationship. And sure enough, when I made the commitment and said, okay, I'll take this on the condition that I have someone to do it with. I want a companion. I don't want to do it on my own. And lo and behold, like 2 weeks later, I met Jess, and it was instant, like magic, like it was the first time with Lynn. I've never dated in my whole life. And it was just incredible and powerful. And we got married 6 months after that, and we're having this amazing adventure that's fulfilling what I've been told is possible for the next 30 years. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm on a podcast with you, because it's all part of finding people who are ready to live a different type of life, a vibrational leadership life, where we can lead by example, a life of fulfillment and fun and adventure, and bring other people in to say, look, you can take control. You can get off social media. You can stop watching political debates and you can have a life, and you can then show other people how to have a life. So that's what the next 30 years is about for me.
Wow.
But I was also told that you would walk the world, whatever that means. And here I am now. Jess and I just gave away every stick of furniture we own, and we're totally free. We have our suitcases and a bank account, and we're traveling the world for.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. So where's the next trip or the next place?
So we just moved coast to coast. So we're on the East Coast now. We just moved from the West Coast. Jess has never really experienced England in a proper way. She's only ever been to London, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. And so it's just a city, right? So we're going to do that. So she has that experience, which I think she'll really enjoy. I'm going to take her to where I grew up and all that sort of stuff. Bit of like cement the story.
Right.
And then we're on an adventure, a real adventure for 6 months. After that, I'm not really sure where we'll end up. Probably Puerto Rico for a while. And after Puerto Rico, Southeast Asia. And then after that, I have no idea.
Wow. That sounds so, let's talk about thrilling. Not knowing where the world's energy is going to take you.
It's totally free.
It's
totally freeing. Best thing I've ever done in my life is give everything away. And we did literally give everything away. I mean, but the thing was, we made the decision to give everything away. And I thought, well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And then the next thing, someone turns up and they would have this conversation and they're talking about electric bikes and they can't afford them. We say, well, we've got 2. We're giving them away. Take them. And
wow.
What that did to people, all that, a pool table, $7,000 pool table, like, take it, go. It was so amazing, the stories that came into our life that allowed us to place what we thought had sentimental value, but actually had no, it needs to be in the hands of someone else who's going to appreciate all these things, because nothing can die. Everything's alive, right? So everything we owned had a name. So the pool table had a name, and the golf cart had a name. We gave the golf cart away, Jeff, to the people across the road. What they've done with that giving away. The photographs and the joys we've received since show that that was the right thing to do. They're having a blast with this. It's been very eye-opening for me. I never thought it would be that easy, especially after a 38-year marriage. A lot of the stuff in our home was stuff that I had accumulated with Lynn. I had sentimental value. I didn't think it would be that easy to give away, but it really was. So yeah, take it, go. And so yeah, to be totally free to. And it's a blessing because not everyone can be this way because everyone's got responsibilities, a job, a mortgage, and all that kind of stuff. We're very blessed not to have any of those things. And we're just free to travel and hopefully make a positive impact wherever we go. And that's it.
Wow. Yeah. That's the coolest thing that I've heard in a while in terms of what people are going to be doing with their lives. So I commend you. I think it's fantastic. And you have given me more time than I deserve, more time than I asked for. And my gosh, you got my wheels turning as well. I'm going to trevorgblake.com immediately. And I got to get the 3 simple steps too. So I can't wait to dive in and see what this is all about.
I think you'll have a blast. I think your energy is such that I read souls too. So your energy is such that you'll just get it. You'll go down this rabbit hole and love it.
Well, I have that feeling as well, and I can't wait. So thank you for sharing with me and with the entire audience. Something that I imagine is too valuable to put a number on.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Brandon. Great questions. And this was so much fun. What a great conversation. I feel like we were around a campfire.
Yeah. Well, I do too. It's interesting. You say you read souls. Well, I'd love to hear what my soul looks like. But I with doing these podcasts, it's so strange. Within the first 10 seconds, I can tell whether or not I'm sort of simpatico with somebody or whether or not this is going to be a good discussion or whether they're rather be doing something else. And I got a good feeling as soon as we got on. So
I love these conversations. I think they're so powerful. And I hope people who are listening or watching, I hope they enjoy it. And get, if you get one thing out of it, like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, then it's been worthwhile.
Yeah. And these things, gosh, I had one of the world's leading experts in AI on about 5 months ago. And, I never know where these things are going to go or where how many people are going to see them. And he reached out the other day and was telling me that the chief technology officer for these 5 publicly traded companies had gotten a hold of the podcast and reached out to him because of the discussion. And it just blew my mind because I just thought, how in the world did it get there? How did they see boundary? I mean, so
Right.
It's interesting. It makes me think about, what you've had to say with regard to the energy and anticipation and knowing and things going places where it needs to go.
Yeah, I just imagine the best case scenario and stick with that. Just keep reimagining best case scenario, and it has no choice but to follow that because that's physics.
Gosh, I love that. Now that is inspiring, and I'll end this here in a second, I promise. But this is the longest outro in the history of podcasts. But it's inspiring because it's empowering, right? Because it's so easy to get this feeling like that you're just sort of part of this, prison that they call life that already has preset rules and you just kind of get bounced around it. But even the idea that there's the ability that you have some control over what happens and the type of life that you live is very, very empowering. And I think surprised that your website hasn't crashed with people signing up. And hopefully this podcast gets a bunch more people there for you.
I hope so. I just want to get the message out there. Everything I do, I don't need the money, so everything I do goes to cancer research and development. So,
oh, good. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So tell me a little bit more about that. So all the funds from the
everything,
transformation experience.
Yeah, everything I do on this side of the world, trevorgblake.com, transformation experience, 3 simple steps, secrets to a successful startup is another book I wrote, just to give people step-by-step plan to do their own thing. all of that, yeah, it goes to, so it's a project I started in 2005, believe it or not. It's called Neovia Oncology. And so it's based upon my experience with my mum, because my mum had cancer and she fought it really well, kept her grace, but the chemotherapy side effects destroyed her. And I've always been motivated to find a way to treat cancers at least as well as anything that's out there, but without the side effects. And so everyone said, that's not possible. You don't know what you're doing. You're not qualified. Yada, yada, yada. Couldn't get investors for love nor money. So I funded it myself. And that sounds heroic, but I just provide the money. I don't provide the brains. I mean, I've been able to pull together amazing people. And I came across this physician in San Francisco in 2005, and he had cracked this problem of overcoming what we call drug-resistant cancers. So most cancers get resistant to the drug that they're being treated with. And once that happens, it's like it's over. And so he found a way to overcome the drug resistance. And he said there's no side effects, and no one believed him. And I was working part-time for a company, and I brought it in, I licensed it in. And then that company folded, and I thought, this is too good to leave on the shelf. So I started a company around it. His name is Lisha Yang, a genius of a man. And we've grown up together over the last 20 odd years. We're like brothers now. He calls himself my older brother. And so we just finished phase 1A, clinical trials in 40 patients with really late stage 4, terrible, huge, solid tumor cancers who have tried, the patients have been given like 6 different types of drug, terrible side effects, life is miserable. And we were able to shrink the cancer with no side effects. And I think that's a huge breakthrough. I think so. The pharmaceutical industry's response is, we'll buy that. And my response is, no, you're not, because you charge $400,000 a treatment. And so we're going to make it generic priced. And that's part of the reason why I am on the move around the world, because it's a risky thing to take on the pharmaceutical industry and say, I'm going to disrupt it. And I'm going to make I'm going to make available an incredible drug. I'm going to make it available to anybody, no matter their circumstances. And I don't think the pharma industry really likes that. So it's good to keep on the move at this point. So that's the thing. So everything I do is to that, and not giving my address out. yeah,
don't need. Well, that's also fascinating.
I joke. It's not actually a joke, but so this is one of the intentions is to make a really good drug without side effects available to everybody.
Wow.
It shouldn't be disruptive. It shouldn't be, this is an amazing thing, but the industry is what it is. I've worked in it most of my life, so I know what it is, and the industry deserves to kick up the backside. And I hope I'm one of the ones that delivers it.
God, I do too. What's after 1A? How many more?
Because of our safety profile, we need 1B, which is another 30 patients, another 15 million, 3 years, and then if we can overcome, I shouldn't say if, when we overcome the reliance of the FDA on funding from big pharma, and we can get an honest response from the toxicologists who aren't part of the lobbying, then we can get approval.
Got it.
That's
great.
It's a big take. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that's not one of the things that you want to lead with or talk about first. But
I don't want to put a big red circle on my back.
That's what I was going to say, but I also understand.
Out to me, and there might be a reason for that. Maybe someone's listening who says, I want to be part of that. That'd be good.
Well, in all seriousness, if you think about it and you'd rather me cut that?
No, I'm willing to take it on. I'm an old guy. What can happen to me? It's like the classic saying, is I'm not afraid of murdering somebody because life imprisonment doesn't mean that much to me anymore.
Yeah, but you got 30 more years. You got till 93, right?
This is part of it. And what a story it will make. What a movie this will make.
Absolutely. I love that. All right, good stuff, Trevor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brendan.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. That was fantastic.
Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.